Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Netcapital team. Let's allow one moment for everybody to settle in. Thanks. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in and welcome again. Today, I'm excited to welcome Robert Feuerbach with Zero G Launch. As always, this company is actively raising capital on the Netcapital platform. I am going to add a link to the chat right now, and you can go directly to netcapital.com and search Zero G Launch, or you can go directly to this link, which is netcapital.com/companies/aerospace flight technologies. Go ahead and add that right there. That's aerospace-flight-technologies. So a few quick housekeeping items. Please do ask questions. We're here for you as potential investors. Please do use the Q&A feature in Zoom. I know there's also a chat function, but Q&A makes it so much easier to make sure that I get to as many of the questions as possible. And of course, we do want to keep this interactive, so please do participate. We look forward to answering your questions. So with all that being said, please join me again in welcoming Zero G Launch to the stage. Come on in, Robert. Tell us a little bit about what you're building here.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the intro and appreciate the chance to kind of share the story a little bit about what we're doing with you guys at Netcapital. Zero G Launch is a young aerospace company established about 18 months ago. Our aim is to disrupt the space industry's pressing need for availability of testing and development platforms for new technologies before they're sent to orbit with the introduction of our space jet. And the space jet is a specially modified Boeing commercial aircraft designed to provide high performance microgravity platform services, and I'll get to that in a minute, but also air launch capabilities for rocket developers. We will be the first to provide both microgravity and air launch with the same vehicle at the lowest prices in the market. So for those of you unfamiliar with the term microgravity, with our space jet, we will be able to create several pairs of zero gravity or microgravity on every flight by following a parabolic flight path, unlike a regular aircraft. This provides much cheaper testing environments, addresses the lack of availability in the market, and also can be an extremely fun consumer experience. Recently, you may have heard of the Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic launches with passengers. What they talked about most was the zero gravity experience being the coolest part of the trip. We will be able to offer that to consumers for less than $3,900 a piece instead of millions, or instead of quarters of millions, whatever the case may be. With our space jet, we bring the airborne testing lab or rocket launch platform near to the customer, not the other way around. And we aim to perform our specialized flights through a network of 6 space jet aircraft located worldwide. Another first in the industry, of course, but essentially we will have the capability to launch rockets from the underbelly of our aircraft while in flight, reducing cost and avoiding availability and weather concerns associated with ground launches. So a bit of a technical description as well, as if you will, but it is a technical product, technical service as well, but we have the consumer element that I talked about as well, Eric.
No, thank you so much for that background. That sounds like a great time. Tell us a little bit more, if you can, about you and how you came to Zero G and why your background supports this, and then Terry and the rest of the team as well.
Sure. Well, we come from a long heritage of working in the space industry. Myself and my team, we've had with the shareholding team as well. We've had about 100 years of experience in aerospace for satellites, for rocket launch systems. In-space robotics and servicing, commercial airlines, special service aircraft operations, and also, very importantly, the regulatory certification processes that you need to get airplanes, into services. So we come with experience from various leading US and international companies like SES in Luxembourg, where I lived for 6 years, which is the largest global satellite operator by revenue today. Eutelsat in France and in Italy. SpaceX, I think a lot of people know SpaceX. Hughes Network Systems, Maxar, the group that designs big satellites and deep space missions. Cathay Pacific, American Airlines, and other companies. So a really strong group of our executive team putting together our minds here. So I personally have been involved as an executive running teams of 2 previous startups, which are generating 150 million and 2 billion in revenues yearly today. Our company does assemble a unique group, in my mind, of individuals with an extensive international background in aerospace operations, and a very strong relationships across the space industry, frankly, who want to impact the growth of our industry in a positive, meaningful way. Team members cover general management, technical engineering, commercial sales, and of course, finance. So I think we have a great group in the company. Of course, we have other team members waiting to jump in as well as soon as we have a full financing, but that's further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Strong core and ready to expand on it. But for those who aren't as familiar, and I think space is having a coming of age moment, at least for our generation, I feel like it's reborn. So it's an exciting time in the space for sure, waking up, watching the programming, seeing these launches. But for those who are unfamiliar with the problem, what's going on with gravity and why is it so hard to test in that atmosphere?
Well, in fact, our problem is gravity, right? That's the problem we're trying to solve. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Nearly all spacecraft and technologies being developed for launch to space need to be designed and developed for the harsh environment in orbit by accessing research and development testing facilities on Earth before you launch them to space, right? So the first problem is microgravity or zero gravity testing options for space technologies that are available today, like a sounding rocket that goes straight up and comes back down again, high altitude balloons, or even putting your equipment on the space station are very expensive, very complex, and take a long time to schedule. In many cases, companies are waiting for 1.5 years before you can get your equipment into the testing pipeline, right? Second problem, humanity has launched to date a total of roughly 7,000 satellites since the beginning of our space age era, right? Or early 50s or so, with about 50% of these satellites operational today. Astonishingly, there are currently nearly 60,000 next generation small satellites with frequency license already granted by the FAA or the ITU in Geneva to be launched during the next 10 years. 60,000 when there are 7,000 since the beginning of sort of industrial mankind, let's say, right? So these spacecraft need a reliable and economical way to get to orbit. They need to maintain their spacecraft constellations once there by replenishing a significant part of those satellites because they're short lifespans and in-orbit failures. And the main way we still launch these satellites today is from a ground-based licensed vertical launch site in coastal regions, right? In the coasts of the United States and Europe and other places, which are prone to frequent weather and regulatory delays. So our problem solves both of these issues, right? Our company solves both of these problems, I should say. We provide, number one, an easy to schedule aircraft-based high precision microgravity flights on our space jet, as I mentioned before, where we can perform parabolic flight maneuvers, offering anywhere from 0G to nearly 2G environments for astronaut training, space technology and equipment testing, and yes, exciting consumer zero gravity flight experiences on a global basis, not just in the United States. Number two, the SpaceJet provides an airborne launch carrier platform for development, testing, and air launch of various rocket-powered vehicles our customers are developing for development of or for deployment of their small satellites into orbit, or for the budding hypersonic flight vehicle market. That's another big market today. Our SpaceJet can depart from missions from regular airport runways around the globe, fly over the ocean for less regulatory paperwork and safety restrictions, and launch from over the clouds at up to 40,000 feet, way above the major influence of any bad weather conditions. So we're solving a couple of really big problems here, Eric.
I know, absolutely. Excuse me. I think the for those who are going to ask questions, please let's dig deeper into the solution, the microgravity. I'm sure this is probably a little bit nuanced for a handful of folks. So please do ask those questions. I want to encourage and remind people about the Q&A feature in the Zoom functionality. But continuing along here, how big of a market are we talking about with the gravity issue and the zero-G solution?
Well, you mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, Eric, that space right now has a lot of visibility and is growing tremendously fast. With the likes of my former boss Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and so forth, there's a lot of visibility there. There's also some private space missions. One of them is launching tonight, as a matter of fact, on a rocket to take 4 regular people into space. And so the industry is really growing quickly right now. Right now, I've never seen the amount of growth that I've seen now. I've never seen this in the last 30 years. But during the next 10 years, our global space economy is forecast to grow to more than double, from $420 billion to $1 trillion economy, $1 trillion plus by most accounts. There are hundreds of new companies which have joined our space industry during the last 5 years. And I've seen many of them, and I talked to a lot of them, and I work with several of them. And many more are doing every year, joining the space industry. So they're providing fresh ideas, innovations in space hardware and infrastructure, Earth observation with new miniaturized optical and radar sensors, software, analytics services, reusable rocket launches, which now we're absolutely used to. That used to be, it wasn't a thing before. High-speed flight systems and all kinds of other technologies, right? So as part of the space economy, our company's total addressable markets are in several areas. $20 billion for the high-speed point-to-point flight market. I'm talking about the kinds of flights in the next 20 years will you be able to fly from, say, New York to Japan in the space of about a half an hour or an hour, right? That industry is a $20 billion industry point-to-flight for that market. The $70 billion rocket and missile market, mainly hypersonics, as I mentioned before. There's a $10 billion microgravity research and development market. And lastly, a $6 billion launch industry market today, which is also growing tremendously with many more players in the market. So beyond that potential, it's worth, I think, mentioning that the global investment community's appetite into space, venture capital, private equity, and even the special purpose acquisition companies, the SPACs, and that activity across the space industry has been growing at an incredible pace and at very high valuations, by the way. We expect this to get more aggressive as companies like Blue Origin, SpaceX, and Virgin Galactic continue to get tons of media coverage, generating great interest in space and across the globe.
Good for everybody, I think, with the developments in space and the excitement. Very cool. Okay, I do want to remind everybody, it's a good time for a shameless plug that Zero-G Launch is actively raising capital on the Netcapital platform. I've added a link into the chat, but for those of you who missed it earlier, I'm going to go ahead and add it again. But as always, you can go directly to netcapital.com and search Zero-G Launch, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/aerospace flight technologies. Excuse me. I just want to remind everybody about that as we're getting to about the midway mark of our scheduled programming. So the question all the investors want to know at home, how does Zero-G Launch make money? What's the revenue model look like?
Sure. We believe we disrupt the microgravity and launch services providers markets with our latest generation, easy to schedule, globally available, and cost-effective airborne platforms, right? These are the space jets we talked about. We plan on starting our business providing revenues through microgravity services with a single aircraft during the year 1, and then self-finance our air launch capability modifications at the end of year 2. Then, and only then, we'll add the additional aircraft to our fleet from year 3 onwards to a total of 6 aircraft worldwide. Our business generates income in 3 main categories through a close collaboration with the following industry partners, both domestically in the US and internationally, I want to say. Number 1, microgravity flights for astronaut training and technology research and development, which we would work through technology integrators and space equipment developers who pay us for those services, right? They pay to fly on our aircraft, and for those, and they tell us the kinds of parabolas they want us to fly for them. Number two, universal air launch services for orbital rockets and hypersonic vehicles. Again, we would do that through launch system developers and operators of their own vehicles who will pay us for these services. They will pay us to carry the rockets into certain areas and to have a special mission profile to launch our rockets, but also just to test them, to captive carry them, to do drop tests and so forth and so on. So they pay us for these services. Number three, the consumer zero gravity flight experiences around the globe. There we work through major city partnerships, promoting and marketing our flights from their cities. Zero-G Launch would sell tickets directly to consumers in this particular case. Consumers would pay a flat fee for this experience to us. And we have strong partners with strong partnerships with blue chip customers to include our zero-G flights as part of a premium service package that they are packaging together. So again, they do a lot of the marketing activity and so far and so forth, the outreach, but we would sell tickets directly to the consumer in that particular case. So those are the three ways: microgravity flights, air launch, and consumer zero gravity flights. That's how we make money.
Perfect. Very thoughtful and comprehensive. Looking forward to the consumer flights. There's questions coming in. I know we have a couple more scripted questions, but I think it's a good opportunity to engage with the Q&A here. Do you plan to be certified, as experimental? I'm not 100% sure what that means, but maybe you do, Robert.
Well, no, there's two different certifications we need to obtain, right? We did speak about microgravity flights. And for the microgravity flights, particularly for the consumer, we fly under what's called the Part 121 flight certifications. And that is the same certifications that you obtain today to fly basically commercial aircraft. So there's no special certification per se, other than the fact that we have to prove that we're safe and we have the right systems in place and procedures and so forth and so on. For the rocket launch campaigns, different story. There, we do have to get a launch license certification from the FAA, in this case, the FAA AST, which is based in Washington, D.C. They're the ones that clear a launch window for you. And it's as I mentioned before, it's a bit of an arduous process. You have to make sure that you're going to clear populated areas. You have to make sure that you're flying in your flight path. If a rocket gets released, that if something goes wrong, it won't go over populations, it won't hurt anyone. And last but not least, you have to make sure that that rocket has a clear path to go through debris and airplanes and even other satellites that are already flying up there if it's going to be flying through them. So that is a special certification server approval that you have to get from the FAA AST. And that's something we have a good experience with as well. But that's a unique certification that we get on a flight-by-flight basis.
That was so cool. So glad that they asked that question. I did not understand the parameters of the infrastructure built out there. That was great. Thanks for that answer, Robert. More questions coming in, so I think we can continue to engage here. Any special infrastructure required for the City Zero-G launch? Special infrastructure. So
when you mean a City Zero-G, meaning I understand by that, I guess, consumer flights, right?
I do believe.
Okay. Well, in that particular case, the infrastructure required there for us for zero gravity flights wouldn't be very different from that of a regular airport, right? We need to get fuel. We need to be able to do regular maintenance on the aircraft from certain stops after we fly certain amounts of hours. Regular airplane fuel is required. Maybe of course the stairway to be able to access the airplane from a tarmac location and so forth. So nothing too different from what we would require from a regular airport facility. We would require a long enough runway, of course, so we can take off and land. We can't just take off from a tiny runway. But those are the kind of restrictions that we have that are well known and well understood today for the industry, for consumer flights.
Awesome. No, that's really cool. Built-in infrastructure. So that's it for now. Please continue to engage. Thanks for being so interactive. All the participants who are asking their questions. Let's continue to keep that going. So what is progress look like so far? You've discussed some of it, but if you can go deeper dive into what you've accomplished up to this date, and then we'll come back to what are the future milestones after that.
Sure. Well, until now, we have done a few things. We've launched and registered a company in Delaware. We have opened a small office in Washington, D.C. We've established our key management team commitments to join our team full-time once full funding is achieved. We have firmed up our technology partners and reviewed the aircraft modifications and technologies needed to begin our flight operations. We have developed our unique intellectual property, or IP, for engineering designs, drawings, and plans to swiftly modify our aircraft upon acquiring it and after funding. We have evaluated various US-based sites for housing our operational headquarters and airplane hangars. We've also signed about $42 million in letters of intent, or LOIs, for early service revenues during the first 3 years. And just recently announced that we also added another customer, which will add another $10 million in LOIs to our first list. Our current early customer pipeline now stands at about $112 million in total projected revenues from these customers. And again, these revenues are well balanced across zero-G consumer flights, rocket launches, and testing in microgravity environments. So we've engaged with Netcapital for our $1 million public awareness funding campaign, as you mentioned, Eric, in order to get the general population excited about the opportunity to participate and owning a little piece of equity in our space venture. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things happening in space. I think we're one of them. And last but not least, we've also engaged the services of a securities company for a $4 million private funding campaign, with which we hope to be in a position to secure our first aircraft by end of this year and to begin our commercial operations right around Q3 of next year, 2022.
Great, great, great. A lot of progress so far. There are more questions coming in, but I want to keep along progress and future milestones. I know you were talking about fundraising and the private placement and getting the plane. Any other future milestones that you want to share with for the participants, or should we could continue to go into other questions as well?
I think let's continue, but obviously there's a lot of work, and I think we've been engaging with quite a few companies that want to have strategic partnerships for these flights around the world. It's a lot of fun to see, Eric, that there's so much appetite for bringing us to a capital city somewhere around the world, because they want to be the first to offer this in their location. So they're willing to do a lot for us to be able to bring these flights to their capital cities. And that's one exciting thing for me, because I've worked internationally for almost all my whole career in space. By default, we're in space, we're looking at the whole Earth. So we travel and work around the world, and I've been practically everywhere and worked in many places and lived in many countries around the world as well. But it's exciting to me to see the appetite that cities have, and they want to do some very, very innovative agreements with us to be able to bring us there on these flights. And that's fun. That's a fun thing as well. It's a fun activity. Flying in zero gravity, I don't know if any people listening have done that. It's just an awesome experience. It's something unlike you've ever experienced, to be floating with nothing holding you back, and just basically just like an astronaut in space. It's transformative. So it's kind of a fun thing to be able to do for consumers as well.
I'll be super excited, Robert. Oh my goodness. Okay, cannot wait. Great questions coming in here. So we're just gonna keep plowing ahead. What type of aircraft will be used for micro and orbital?
It's the same aircraft for both. It will be modified, as I say, in 2 stages. First stage for microgravity, we generate revenue and income, and then we finance the modifications for air launch. But it is a single aisle Boeing jet that we're modifying for this case. And we plan on having the same model across regions in the world, so that we can have potentially, if there's an issue with one of them or some maintenance required, we can use other aircraft to kind of sit in.
Great. And so I think this is a follow up to that same Boeing. So Boeing 777.
No, it's not a 777. We haven't publicly disclosed which one it is, but I think people in the know will recognize it immediately.
Okay, great, perfect. Thanks for that. Will you be your own airline, or are you planning on partnering with an air carrier?
Well, it is an interesting question, and I think there are some air carriers that may have some appetite in creating a division, more sort of space entertainment kind of oriented division. That's not our primary plan today. I mean, as I said, we're partnering with the cities themselves, the partner cities themselves. They're promoting the flights. They're promoting these experiences in their areas and to bring us in there in the first place. So, I could see, for example, a partnership with an airliner in providing us some extra airframes in the future, for example, that they want to provide as equity in the company as we grow to airplane number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, right? That could be a potential agreement that we could have with some particular airline partners out there.
Yeah. And I think you touched on this in future milestones, but just to make sure that there's clarity, when do you expect to offer the first consumer zero gravity flight, target cities, airports for initial flights?
First flights, if we are able to get our funding completed by the end of this year, first flights would be right around August, September of next year. And we would perform those flights out of Florida to begin with. And from Florida, we'll go to Canada and perform some flights in Canada as well. That'll be the first part of our flight campaign for end of next year, 2022. And these are, of course, all revenue producing flights, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Awesome. I love this engagement. Please continue. Participants asking the questions. This is great. What is the energy consumption rate for the space program testings? And then I think this is a separate question. Is it affecting the 60,000 satellites in the future?
Okay. I guess I have to interpret that question a little bit here. Energy consumption, I guess, implied in that question is how much are we maybe polluting by affecting launches and so forth with that many satellites going up. Energy means, of course, you have a propellant that needs to be in a rocket, and the rocket needs to get up to space. So to give you an idea, a large rocket like the Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX, for example, utilizes the amount, generates the amount of pollution that an aircraft would generate, a 747 for a transatlantic or a flight from, say, the United States to Asia. That's the equivalent of it. And there are 20,000 aircraft flying every single day, right? So if that's the concern of the question, I don't know if that was exactly the question, but in terms of energy, there is energy, of course, that needs to be put into a rocket to propel it. But in terms of the expenditure of that energy and into the atmosphere, it's equivalent of one aircraft flight in a 747.
Perfect. I think that rounds out those questions for now. We'll continue along with our script, and please continue to ask the questions, participants. They're great. What do you see as a potential exit for investors, general exit strategy?
Ideally, of course, we would like to see the growth of our business plan that has been forecasted. I think we've been pretty modest in our forecast, but our business plan sees a growth from $9 million in revenues in year 1 to $150 million by the 5th year of full operational capability of the company. So by this time, we would be in a position to be acquired by a larger aerospace player at a valuation roughly exceeding $500 million, so about $500 million there. So this model conservatively includes, as I said before, 6 aircraft. We believe that demand could be much higher, accelerating the need to add additional aircraft to our fleet over time, especially because we're operating worldwide. In such case, revenues would be higher and would be our valuation. But it is based in minds on a conservative multiple compared to other space precedent transactions in the last few years. Does that answer your question, Eric? You're on mute, by the way.
I'm so sorry. My Bluetooth remote tried to die on me just there, and barely got it back together. So I could not unmute. but we have more questions coming in. Thanks for holding down the fort while I work through my technical difficulties. How will, oh, I was trying to disconnect again. I'm gonna probably have to switch batteries after this, but I'm gonna ask those questions and I'll be right back.
Okay.
How will you differentiate your flights from the current zero-G providers in France and the US?
Yeah, well, there are a few key differentiators there, right? Number one, will you be using a new technology aircraft with the latest and greatest in it? We will be also including an avionics system that will be piloting the parabolas, the parabolic flights for the aircraft. They won't be piloted parabolas. They will be actually governed by the avionics system. So they'll be very, very high precision parabolas. Thirdly, we will be at a very, very different price from what our competitors are providing today. Our competitors start at $7,000 for a flight, and they go up to $10,000. And we're talking about the three competitors out there, one in the US, one in France, and one in Russia. We will be introducing our flights, as I mentioned, for $3,900 per passenger, which is a very aggressive price, but it's a price at which we are able to make a good amount of money as well. And with the latest and greatest of technology to offer a truly unforgettable experience for the consumer.
That is great. That is great. I'm going to transition now to our what we call closing remarks. Just asking, why now is the perfect time for the attendees and those who will watch the recording to go and join. Go to netcapital.com, join the family, and invest in zero-G. I'm trying to check to see if any other questions want to sneak in before we do that, but I'll go ahead and welcome you in, Robert. And if we get a question that sneaks in after, we can get to that. But why don't you tell us, Robert, why is now the perfect time to join the zero-G family by investing through Netcapital?
Well, in my view, of course, and it's a bit of a biased view because I'm a space guy, there's no better time to invest in space as when you see hundreds and hundreds of companies getting involved, right? We've clearly seen that. We've seen brands and companies that didn't exist 5 years ago that are now already some of them have already launched their public offerings and are listed on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange. And we're in a period right now of tremendous innovation in terms of the kinds of services and analytics and things that are going to be benefiting our people here on Earth. So with the advent of small technology, small satellites that are being launched now to go to space, the paradigm has completely changed from the big, school bus size satellites that were launched, for the past 20, 25 years into space providing services, like video and two-way broadband, to now being able to kind of launch disposable small satellites. And these satellites have the latest and the greatest of technology. They basically have your iPhone type of technology on them because they don't need to last for 15 years, right? They don't need to be radiation hardened and they don't need to be designed to last in the harsh environment of space. So you launch these satellites now in groups and you let them fly in formation. So you can have several of them covering a particular service you want to offer to the customer. And you have now a system where they will last about 3 years, 4 years, maybe maximum 5 years, and you just keep replenishing them. Launch more. You'll allow the other ones to degrade, come back in and burn up in the atmosphere, and you keep launching more with the latest and greatest, again, of technology in the years you're launching them. So there's no better time right now. Innovation is ripe right now, and there's so much going on. There are so many young companies like ours as well, just getting in here and to offer our services. I think our growth is exponential. I think our growth is looking very, very rosy, honestly, over the next few years because of so many people getting involved here, so many companies building sensors and satellites, so many companies getting involved in the launch side. And frankly, we as consumers on Earth will be benefiting from all of that activity. So great time to be involved in the space.
Thanks, Robert. And we are going to creep one more question in here coming in. So with the planned rocket launch platform, are you planning on hanging it from under the fuselage, from the wing, or on top of the fuselage? If under/over the fuselage, will you have a way to access the rocket up to the time of launch, or will it be totally external?
Yeah, very good. In fact, the rocket itself is in the underbelly of the aircraft. And I'll move here so you can kind of see right there, the rocket under. It's a lot easier to operate an aircraft and for the operations and the release of basically a missile from under your aircraft. It's a lot easier to get that done if you're carrying it from the underbelly. And that allows you to do, captive carries, as I mentioned before, where you're flying the rocket to see the aerodynamics around the rocket as they're developing the rocket. It allows you to do drop tests where you just simply drop it and see how it navigates, in air. And then, of course, the launches. And for the launches, we would have the underbelly of the aircraft. We have an interface system, which is our own IP, and that allows you to have a communication for the rocket until the last minute before you launch, right? So you'll have communications, you'll have pressurization systems, what we call the umbilicals will be connected to the rocket until it's actually released from the underbelly. So it makes our missions a lot simpler than trying to launch it from on top or anywhere else. And it makes it also unique for us because we can adapt multiple types of rockets in the underbelly, not just a one mated rocket like, for example, Virgin Galactic has, or Virgin Orbit has a rocket they developed, and that's the only rocket they are launching is from their underbelly, is the one that they built, right? So in our case, we can go to multiple rocket manufacturers and hypersonic vehicle manufacturers, and we can carry them in the underbelly of our aircraft, So it's a good model, and it's a model that allows us to work with multiple operators as well.
Perfect. I'm so glad we got that in. Thank you for asking that question. It was a good one. With all that being said, thank you so much to all of our participants and your fantastic questions. Thank you for engaging. As always, this has been recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So you can go to YouTube and search Netcapital and you'll see that there shortly. Of course, I want to thank Robert for coming on and telling us a little bit more about what you're building with Zero-G launch. And it's been a pleasure to hear all the discussion today about what you're building. It's a very exciting time.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure, as always, and working with Netcapital has been great as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, appreciate you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, Robert. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.